Welcome for this first webinar of the webinar series from the EASD Academy. It's my pleasure to host Vivienne Parry, who is a science writer and broadcaster. She's very famous around the world. She also works for the BBC, and of course she's also the host of the EASD TV. So she's interviewed many big shots in the field of diabetes, and she's gonna teach us today how to improve our science communication skills. So Vivienne, we don't have much time, therefore the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
It's my absolute pleasure. So hello, lovely people. How are you? I hope you're going to have a very good time for the next hour with me. As Katerina says, I'm a writer, I'm a broadcaster. I've done lots of things, serious things for the BBC. I also sit on the board of UKRI, which is, or used to sit on the board of UKRI, which is the funds, the strategic body for all the funding for the research councils. So I'm very familiar with researchers. And I've interviewed thousands of you, literally thousands of you during my career. So what I say to you comes with love and great affection, and I hope it will help you communicate better. And one of my big things is that for me, when I go to congresses, for instance, like for respiratory science, they are very good at talking to people about the need for instance, clean air policies. And one of the things I notice in diabetes is that you're not so good at making the case for the prevention of diabetes, for strategies to deal with diabetes as they are. So one of the things that I hope that I'm going to help you with is how to talk to people like policymakers, as well as your big boss, in case you're ever stuck in the lift with your big boss, the dean of the medical school, the chair of the faculty, and he or she says, well, what do you do? And I'm going to help you have a conversation with him or her that will make them think, I've got to talk to this person more. This is a person who is clearly on the up. They're very important. I must look at their research more. So I'm trying to big you up, to help you with your conversations. And I'm going to start with a couple of things of practical tips. So if I'm ever doing a voiceover for the BBC, or I'm starting a broadcast, I'll tell you what I do, because if you start to talk to somebody, if you're doing a big presentation, what often happens is that you start to squeak and your voice goes higher and higher and higher. And in the end, you sound like Minnie Mouse on helium. And you have to make your voice relax. So this is how you do it, my friends. Are you all watching me? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to breathe out. And what you see is you see not only do my shoulders drop, but my voice drops by about half an octave. It's a really good technique. Remember to breathe again, though. Breathe out. So as you're being introduced, for instance, just count in your head 3, 2, 1. And then you can start, and you've got a lovely low voice, and you're not likely to squeak. If you're doing something on screen, think about the clothes that you're going to wear and where you're going to be. So I can see Katerina has got who is not in the best of situations, by the way, but she's got a bright light behind her. And that's kind of distracting. So think about, and Ben I'm looking at, can you see Ben? Ben has got a fabulous light reflected in his whiteboard. So it's not making his face look as beautiful as it ought to be. So think about where the lighting is. Jan, you have got a fabulous reflection of your screen in your glasses. So you need to angle your screen or angle you so that I'm not seeing your, yes, not seeing either up your nose, Jan, or the screen. Anybody else feel brave enough to turn on their screen, their visual? Please do. Ah, here we are. Alana, hello. Sandra, hello. Pierre, hello. How nice to welcome you this evening. Charlotte, hello. Beatrice, hello. Catherine, so nice to see you all. So what I thought I'd do is I would tackle several of the things that I know you all find difficult. And I'm going to be doing an interactive masterclass, which means that I'm going to pick on a few of you to tell me about your research. And I'm going to help you tell me that research better and more effectively. Okay. And now you may wonder why in the chat I've got a thing about, comes from the BBC website. It's about the pop group a-ha and electric vehicles. And you will be thinking, what on earth is that doing there? One of the things is lots of people say to me, how can I stop myself sounding boring? And you've all been in presentations where somebody has just gone and their voice is flat all the time. And the way to stop yourself being boring is to try a trick, which is to find any old piece on the BBC website or anywhere like that. And first of all, record yourself in the phone reading that piece of text. And when you listen to it back, you may sound a bit boring. And it's because you're not varying your voice enough. So what you need to do is you need to go through that piece of text and you need to underline all the words that you think are important in that text. And then what you have to do is you have to read that text as if you were a Shakespearean actor. So I've got a bit of text here about a-ha. So let me read you and listen, you'll see what I mean. Norway is miles ahead of the UK when it comes to electric cars, and much of its early lead is thanks to an unlikely collaboration between environmental activists and the pop group a-ha. Back in the 1980s, two leading lights in the Nordic environmental movement were pushing for electric vehicle technology, but it just wasn't being noticed. But then they recruited the country's biggest pop group to help push the issue into the mainstream. a-ha were one of the most popular bands in the world. Okay, so did you hear what I was doing there? So I was emphasizing certain words. And when you first hear yourself doing that, you think, I sound ridiculous. Stop it, Vivienne. I sound completely awful doing this. But actually, what I then want you to do is I then want you to play that thing that you've just recorded on your phone to somebody else. And do you know what? They think you'll sound really normal and interesting. So what we hear ourselves isn't necessarily what other people hear. And the other thing is, not only do we not hear ourselves how other people hear us, we don't see ourselves how other people see us. So you know how terrible it is when you first hear yourself on an answer phone message and you think, surely that's not me, and it surely is you, and you sound terrible, you think. But actually you just have to use your voice to make those up and downs, to make the differences of emphasis, and also changes in the pace and speed of what you're doing. Now, in general, if you're talking about something and your key slide and your key bit of information, let's say, is in slide 12, rush through 11, and then what you do is you stand, if you're giving it in person, absolutely still. And on your presentation of slide 12, which is your key point, you only have that key point on your presentation. You don't have any other graphs, unless the graph is the thing. You don't have anything else, and you just stand absolutely still and say, this is the key point I want to make to you. And at that point, as you're standing still saying this is the key point, everybody will listen to you. So it's what I'm telling you is that when you're trying to communicate, you need to do a combination of changes of speed and pace. You want to make sure that what you've thought is the most interesting thing is in a place by itself. You want to be still when you say it. Okay, so the other thing about visuals, and when you look at yourself, do you know, the first time I ever made a film for the BBC, I was just appalled. I was completely appalled. I ran a medical research charity. I'd never done any television, and I kind of blagged my way into the BBC. And I didn't tell quite the truth. They wanted, I answered an advert in the Guardian newspaper that said television presenters wanted must have evidence of science communication skills. And I wrote this ridiculous letter saying that on any night of the week, I was to be found talking to elderly residents in twilight rest homes about nuclear magnetic resonance. And the BBC were really intrigued by that and said, send us your showreel. So showreel is kind of compilations of clips that you've done before. And I didn't have one because I'd never done any TV. So I told a little white lie and I said, the broadcasters can't make the footage available in time, so I can't send it to you. So it wasn't strictly a lie because obviously there wasn't any footage. But anyway, I then managed to get into the BBC. I'd never done any television before, and I found myself presenting their primetime science show, iconic science show, which was called Tomorrow's World. So there I was doing that, and they made me do a film. And honestly, my first film, I would die if anybody saw it now. It was just terrible. And I looked at it and I thought, you know, I want an amputation at the neck. I'm never going to wear that dress again. It was just awful. But my friends, the thing that I have to tell you is that you must watch yourself. It will be torture. So what you need to do is, when you've done something and it's been filmed, as quite a lot of stuff is now, you must go with a very large drink of something very alcoholic, and you shut yourself in a room with no one else looking, and you must watch yourself. And it's horrible, but it's the only way that you're going to learn. And one of the things that you'll discover is that when you're under pressure and trying to communicate, you will do something unique to you, which is your sign of nerves. So it's like a poker player, and you know the thing they call the tell, that you do something if you're a poker player, I don't know, you blink your eyes, which means that you're lying, or you know, you're trying to bluff. Or so there will be something, and one of the ways to spot it is to put it on fast forward. And you'll discover that when you're under pressure, you will do something which you'll see much more easily if you're fast forwarding, like you're scratching your head, My thing is I put my head on my side. So I have to really kind of stop myself doing that. So there will be something that you'll do. So have a look at yourself. It may be that you're moving around much more than you think you are. Maybe you're nodding your head too often. Maybe you're waving your arms around. Because remember very often that particularly, so here we are, we're all seeing just our heads. But I often see people who wave their arms around and it's like there's kind of a couple of fish flapping in their laps and they come jumping up. So watch yourself and try and avoid, you'll see immediately what it is that you're doing. Okay, so those are some presentation sort of tips. Anybody got, can we unmute people, Ben?
Yes, I think we fixed that. It should be possible for people to unmute themselves now. So,
okay, so
yeah, we can get it
unmute
interactive.
yourselves if you can. Ah, hello.
Hi.
Now, any questions about that? Anything that about the way you present that you want to ask about in particular?
Well, I always have, when, like you said, when you start, then you start your sometimes I'm not even nervous at the beginning. When as soon as you start, your heart starts racing, and so will one breath will that be enough, or do you do it more often?
Once should really calm you down.
Okay.
Honestly, I think you'll find it will really make a big difference if you do that.
Okay.
Jan is the person who will tell you how to dress because he always looks magnificent. So those are some thoughts about, and now let's think about how you want to say what you're going to say. So here are some tips, and now I'm imagining that you're not talking to your peers. So what you have to remember, I think, is we go to our comfort zone all the time. So we try and talk to people who are like us. But actually, very often, if it's policymakers, if it's, you know, the dean of your school, if it's, I don't know, somebody that you really want to impress that doesn't actually know about your particular area of research, you treat them as if they know exactly your research and all about it. And actually, they don't. And the key thing to do is to tell a story. There's a reason why storytelling has persisted for millennia. And that's because it's a really good way of getting across information and communicating. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to one of you and ask you to tell me what you do. And let's see if we can turn it into something that I might want to use for the BBC. So who wants to put up their hand and say that they'll do that with me? Otherwise, I'm just going to pick somebody at random. Catherine.
Okay.
I'm looking at you. Okay, Catherine, just tell me in about no more than a couple of minutes, tell me what it is that you do. What's your research area?
Well, my area isn't, I don't actually do research in diabetes. I work for the journal Diabetologia, which is linked to the EASD. So part of my job is copy editing manuscripts and trying to improve manuscripts that authors submit to us and that are accepted for publication. But another side of my job is being a little bit more involved in public communications. So I've had a few situations where I've interviewed authors on Zoom to speak to them and ask them questions about their research.
Okay, so what's the problem that you find when they're talking about their research? And I'm going to, I'll write down what I think, and then let's see if we've got a...
Well, I think in both directions. So I think my problem is that I get very anxious beforehand. It's definitely pushing myself out of my comfort zone to be recorded and to watch myself and to be in that situation. But Yeah, the other way around. I think I'm usually very impressed actually at how well people speak about things and explain them to me. And I think one of the most important skills from my end is asking the right questions so that they give people a good chance to expand upon what they have to say. Okay, so one of the things that you should all know about the media is, I don't know how many of you have ever done media stuff, but most of the researchers I know are a bit terrified about talking to the media. And they're terrified about it because they think they're going to make a terrible mistake and get it wrong. Or somehow the people back in the lab are going to see what they've said and, you know, just kind of rip their PhD away from them and say, I don't know what you think you're doing. But again, what you have to remember is that when you're doing stuff with the media, when you're talking to policymakers, when you're talking to your dean or your head of faculty, you're not talking to your colleagues. You're talking, I think you always have to think of your auntie. So, Jan, have you got an auntie who gives you socks for Christmas?
Yeah, I got, yeah.
And what's her name?
Vera.
Vera. Okay,
Vera, yes.
So it's Auntie Vera. So Auntie Vera is not a doctor?
No, she's not. She's an accountant, yeah. Well, she used to be, yeah. She's retired.
So Auntie Vera, if somebody said to Auntie Vera, what is the research that Jan does? She'd probably say, oh, I don't know, but he's ever so clever. That's what your Auntie Vera would say. And so you have to think of your Auntie Vera when you're talking. And some of the things that are really the most obvious to you are not obvious to Auntie Vera. And some of the acronyms that you use are not obvious to Auntie Vera. I got into terrible, terrible trouble once because I thought somebody was talking to me about PSA, as in prostate specific antigen. They were actually talking about a public service agreement. That's completely resigned. So this can be muddled up. So I'm going to talk to Charlotte. Charlotte, tell me what your research is.
My research is about the timing of lifestyle interventions and its relation to metabolic health. So I look into human intervention studies and also on a larger scale, correlation studies. Okay, how can you find a way to say that doesn't use a lot of science words? So how would you say that to Auntie Vera? So I look at what time of day would be the most beneficial for people to stay healthy, so that they don't get sick, like diabetes.
Okay,
maybe.
So you've started in the middle of the story there. So I'm Auntie Vera, and I don't know that it depends what time of day you do exercise. So that's a bit. So you've reduced the impact of what you're talking about because you haven't given me the bit that starts it. So tell me that again, but with a different start to it.
Okay, so people who often exercise and eat at the wrong time of day, such as night shift workers, they have a higher chance of getting sick, such as diabetes. And also, we think then that you need to have a certain moment of the day which actually fit better with your natural rhythm. So we all have a natural rhythm based on the cycle of the sun and the light and the darkness.
So there you've said the thing that should be the start at the end. So it started. Everybody has a daily cycle, and depending on our own cycles, there is an optimum time for when we should exercise
or when we should eat. And that keeping to that optimum time will keep us healthy. We think that people who develop diabetes have an optimum time to do exercise, and we're trying to find out what time of day that should be. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
So do you see what I mean? By turning it round, you've made it more understandable. Do you agree? Nod if you do you see what I did there and how it made it more understandable? Okay, Els. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Where are you today?
I am in Germany right now.
How very nice to have you with us. Hello.
Thank you.
So tell us what your research is.
When I was 12 years old, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And one of the things that, each person who gets diagnosed at one point asks him or herself, why me? So my research is focused on finding out how type 1 diabetes develops, so that you can answer the question, okay, why me? Well, because such and such and such happened. My research is focused on the mistakes that may happen inside the beta cell and the immune system that attacks the beta cell. And normally, a lot of this research is focused on insulin, but there are a lot of other molecules inside the insulin granule that is secreted. So my research focuses on potential errors that are made in the processing of these molecules, and if these mistakes potentially gets recognized by the immune system.
Okay, so that was great, but I kind of lost, I kind of began to lose it towards the end. So you had a great start. She had a great start, didn't she? Thumbs up if she had a great start. So I try and answer the why me question. And I'm really interested in that because I myself am a type 1 diabetic. The thing you started with, do you remember I said that you know so much that you think that what you're saying is ordinary? Mm-hmm. So you started talking about insulin and beta cells, and I'm your Auntie Vera, and I was thinking, beta cells? What are beta cells? So you have to find a way of saying beta cells and molecules in a different way.
Okay.
So how might you start at it? So let's go from
why me?
Yes, why me? And, okay, so one of the things that I'm really interested in
is focusing on the why me question, and my research. What happens in type 1 diabetes is that for some reason the beta cells that make insulin are destroyed by the immune system, and it makes that people with type 1 diabetes don't make insulin anymore.
Okay, stop there. So you've introduced beta cells, and that's because you all think we must talk about beta cells because we must tell people that beta cells are important. But actually, sometimes less is more.
Okay.
So you could just say the cells that are important in producing insulin. Because the trouble is that what you hear is you hear something that you don't know. So your brain is still thinking to itself, oh, beta cells, what are beta cells? And you miss the next bit of what you're saying. So just go from...
Okay.
So Catherine, hang on. Catherine's got a thought.
I just had an observation about that. I wondered if it might depend a little bit on whether you think you're going to need to use that word again. So if, for example, Els wants to talk and use the word beta cells several times, then she might want to explain that they're in the pancreas and they produce insulin. in a very clear way for Auntie Vera, but then so that then she can use the term beta cell again, because I think to keep saying the cells that produce insulin might be too much if she has to repeat that term.
Yeah,
I just wondered.
okay, that's absolutely true.
So for now, Auntie Vera, the cells that make insulin are destroyed by the immune system in type 1 diabetes, and we still do not understand clearly enough how that happens. And right now, a lot of research is focusing on how the cell makes insulin and any mistakes that may happen there. But that cell doesn't only make insulin, it makes a couple of other things as well that are secreted together with insulin, and perhaps some mistakes are made in these things that may that may trigger the immune system to attack these cells, and that's what my research is focusing on.
Great. So improving all the time. So, but what you could say is something like, everybody focuses on insulin. Everybody's heard of insulin, and that's what they focus on. But actually, what I'm interested in is all the other things the cell produces. So make it a kind of, you know, that's what I'm interested in, all these other things. And I think maybe we've been looking in the wrong place. Now, you couldn't say that to your peers, maybe we're looking in the wrong place, because they'd all, you kind of worry about your scientific credibility. But actually, when you're talking to a kind of regular audience, that's absolutely fine. And what you have not to worry about is the folk back in the lab. So, because that's what we do all the time. So I will get somebody in the studio with me, and let's say I've invited them in to talk about, I don't know, red parrot disease. And I've talked to them on the phone beforehand, and we've had a very good conversation, and they come in, and the first thing they want to tell me in the interview is they want to tell me that 2% of the cases of red parrot disease are actually caused by green parrots. and I'll say to them, why did you start talking about green parrots? And they'll always say to me exactly the same thing. What would they think of me back in the lab if they thought I didn't know that sometimes red parrot disease was caused by green parrots? And then this is not a Viva, for heaven's sake. You know, you are not defending your PhD thesis here or taking your final exams. You're talking to ordinary people. And I think one of the things for you all in terms of communication is going back to that thing about less is more. You know, what are the things that are really important here that I really need to get in, and what are the things that actually, if I put them in, will just start to muddle people, where they get kind of, they start to then go down the kind of other little alleyways, and then you can't get them back. So think about also when you're talking, is think about at least, and sometimes it helps if you write these down. So if you're going to do an interview, or if you're talking to somebody, what are the 3 most important things you want to say about your research? So Els, you've already told us one of them, which is it's not just about insulin. So what are the other 2 things that you want to say to us?
It may not be insulin. Yeah, I'm right at the start of my PhD, so. So you might want to say, I'm going to be like a detective. I'm going to have to track down, first of all the different other things that could possibly be in the picture, and then I'm going to have to find what might be the most likely culprit. Okay, Stavros, you've suddenly popped up.
Hello, Stavros. How nice to see you.
Hello.
Are you in Greece?
Yeah,
Whereabouts in Greece?
in Athens.
We like Athens very much. Stavros, what do you do? What's your research?
I'm a consultant in internal medicine and interested in diabetes. I have a special interest in diabetes. And currently my research is I'm part of a team. We're trying to build up a mobile app to help patients with type 1 diabetes choose their insulin dose.
So very interesting to lots of people, interesting to perhaps local radio or even TV. Have you been on local radio to talk about this?
No.
Right. Okay, so Stavros, first of all, tell us about your mobile clinic.
Actually, we are collaborating with some bioengineers, a team with bioengineers from Switzerland, and they have developed that application. So we, as a doctors, trying to give some input in how we will better optimize the application. And at that point, we are trying to also generate some questionnaires to distribute around patients with type 1 diabetes and also healthcare professionals in order to have a better feedback on their needs. So to better make sense of the application.
Okay, so he's done exactly the same thing that Charlotte did. He's put the most important thing at the end. Okay, so you want to talk about your app and your development of your app, but the most important thing is, why are you doing it? Why is it needed? So switch it round so that you start with why this is needed. Why is an app needed, Stavros?
So a lot of people with daily insulin dosing felt it difficult or annoying to try to calculate their calories and their carbohydrates and decide on the insulin dose.
Great. So that great opening there. Top. Okay. What's your next thought? What's the middle of your sandwich?
This need is unmet yet, although much effort has been done with insulin pumps or regular consultations with their doctors. Again, we don't reach the goal. So the goal is to have a better insulin glucose control. Okay,
so again, switch it round. So the first bit was, you said your first bit, then it starts with, the aim is better glucose control. We think we can do that with an app on people's phones. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So sometimes simple is best. We think we can do that with an app on people's phones. We're working with a company in Switzerland to develop a new app, but we need to test it. Yes?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. But we need to test it. So now finish off the story for me.
We need it because this is a difficult journey and we want it to work well. We need each stakeholder to have its voice in this. So we also need patients' input.
Okay,
that's why we are generating.
I'm going to stop you. So a stakeholder is Peter Cushing in the vampire things, that is holding a stake and beating it into Dracula. So your Auntie Vera, Jan, does not talk about stakeholders. stakeholders, so it's like patient pathways, or people, you know, your Auntie Vera does not talk about patient pathways or stakeholders. So if you're talking about stakeholders to ordinary people, or even just to, you know, somebody in your department, talk about all the people that we need to talk to. So who do you need to talk to, Stavros? We need to talk to people with diabetes. We need to talk to their carers. We need to talk to
the people that are treating their conditions, doctors, nurses.
So we need to. So one of the things is, often there are messages about diabetes that you can get out. So one of the messages about diabetes might be that, you know, the best diabetes treatment comes from everyone working together. Patients, doctors, patients' families. And that's why we want to talk to them all to make sure that this app works as well as it can possibly work. Yes?
Yeah, it sounds better, a lot better.
Do you see what I'm trying to do here is to shorten it, to put what's most important at the beginning, and I know that you all want to put it at the end, and then to talk about this in much more human terms. Okay, so, okay, now for the big finish, Stavros. Give me the big finish.
We are very enthusiastic about it because we think that we expect at the end to have a valuable tool for the daily living of each patient with type 1 diabetes and relieve some of their burden.
Okay, so try and make it fit to the, so the big finish, Stavros, if I can be so bold, is to say, we think that by doing this, we'll bring better diabetes care to the people of Athens living with diabetes. Do you see what I've done there?
Yeah.
So talk about your local populations, how you're going to be doing better for them, and to talk about why you need to do something like this. Because always you should think about, when I'm talking about something, so what? So what? You know, so what's the big deal here? Stavros, what is the big deal here? And the big deal is we want to make better care available for people living with diabetes in Athens. Never mind the rest of the world, in Athens. Okay.
Can I ask something?
Yeah, sure, Sandra.
Because I think one of the things that maybe some researchers are also afraid of talking to media is that they sometimes they take off with some big promises for the patients, while the researcher that didn't really. So like we need to find a balance, right? Where the because now you're saying, okay, we're going to improve it for the people of Athens, but I'm always a bit, I'm a bit afraid to say those big things because you don't want to, especially the patient, don't want to give them hope too soon.
Sure, but you're in the middle of developing this, so you want to get people to be involved and to hope that they can, together, they can help improve it. So I absolutely take your point, and you're right. You've got to be careful not to hype things. And I always remember on the BBC, if anybody ever says to us in the BBC, after we've talked about a piece of research, and we say, they say, and when will this be available? And we always say 3 to 5 years. We always say 3 to 5 years. And can I admit to you that on this particular show I used to do, we talked about electric cars being available and on every street corner within 3 to 5 years. And we did that, or the program did that, for 30 years. And we still haven't got electric vehicles. But that's, you know, there's a kind of, I know you don't want to overpromise and big yourselves up, but there's a middle ground, and people want to feel that you're doing something in an area which they think is very important and which impacts their everyday lives. I'm going to come next to Ben.
Hello.
Ben, who's in Copenhagen, and Ben, who's wearing a Three Lions t-shirt, but he tells me that it's because he's run out of t-shirts and he hasn't done enough washing. So Ben, what research do you do?
Right. I study how messages get sent within a cell. So whenever anything happens to your body that requires messages to be sent to communicate what's happening, and then the cell or the organ can respond to that. So in the case of diabetes, say when we're eating a meal, our cells.
So immediately, what am I going to tell him? That he needs to turn that round, because he needs to start with the really important thing for people with diabetes is that their cells get the right messages at the right time.
Yeah.
That's how you need to start that.
Okay.
Okay.
So the really important thing for people with diabetes is that their messages get communicated within their cells in the right way. And
to do what? To do what, Ben?
So that their cells can take up the nutrients that they eat, and they don't rise in the blood, and that's when your blood sugar levels rise. And the problem with type 2 diabetes is those messages get scrambled. They don't get communicated correctly. Yep. And therefore the cell does not remove the sugar from the blood, and that accumulates, causing diabetes. And so my research is looking how those messages are transferred and sent, and then how and where those messages are lost when we have diabetes. And that will give us an idea as to how we can reorganize that chain of communication so that we can prevent or at least treat diabetes and maintain those lines of communication.
Okay, so that was going well, and then he started to witter towards the end.
Yeah.
So there's always a point when you're doing comms when your mouth is moving, but your brain's stopped. And it's kind of, you know, you're just doing that. So the important thing is here, so when we eat a meal, messages go to our cells, telling the cells how to deal with the nutrients from our meals.
Yep.
In type 2 diabetes, we know that the messages get scrambled, so that the things that the cells should be doing, which is taking sugar out, aren't done. What I'm trying to do is trying to see how those messages get scrambled and why they get scrambled, and whether that might help us understand how type 2 diabetes works.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Like those last few sentences could have been half a sentence.
Yeah.
But I couldn't, like you said, my brain, I couldn't work out how to get to that half sentence, right?
Yeah. So it's, and you have to think about sometimes if you're, and again, think about what are the 3 things that you want to get across. You know, what are they? So well done. I'm going to go to Agatha. Agatha, is that right? Am I saying it right?
Yes.
Agatha. Agatha, hello, where are you?
Hello, I'm from Poland.
How very lovely to have you with us.
Thank you.
So tell us about your research.
So what we focus on is people with type 1 diabetes a very important thing for them is to have so-called honeymoon period. This is a time in their lives, usually at the very beginning of their disease, when they still can produce insulin. What we try to do is we try to look at our patients' insulin sensitivity, so how they respond to insulin, and to see how it influences their honeymoon period. So the amount of insulin they produce. This is very important for them because we know that people who are able to achieve and maintain honeymoon period have less complications in the future.
Very good, but so let me see if I've got this right. So one of the things, by the way, if you're ever talking to a journalist or somebody in the media, is to play back, ask them to play back what they've said, what you've said to them, to make sure that they've understood. Because very often when you're talking to a science correspondent, so I'm a science correspondent, can I just tell you I'm rubbish on physics? I'm really rubbish on physics. I'm not particularly good on space either. So but you have to cover it all. So the fact that you've got scientific literacy doesn't mean necessarily that you've got knowledge of diabetes. So you have to make sure that people, what their level of understanding is. So perhaps you could start off, Agatha, by saying, when people with type 1 diabetes first develop their disease, actually, they still have a little bit of function of their cells that produce insulin. We call this the honeymoon period. But then I was wondering, as you're saying, well, what happens after the honeymoon?
Well, what happens after honeymoon? What
they have no function.
Yeah, they have basically no function.
Okay. So that's started. They have this little bit of function, and actually, the length of time. Am I right about this? The length of time they have that little bit of function is actually really important as to how they develop their disease in the future.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think so we want to look at that honeymoon period because we realize that it's very important, but we don't know that much about it. Is that right?
Yes, this is true.
And so now finish it off for me.
So we want to look at honeymoon period because we know that this is very important for people with type 1 diabetes and how it will develop in the future. And now I don't know what to say.
So you need to have the one thing to finish it with. So we're looking at this. And what are you doing? Are you working with particular patients? Are you working with?
So we, in general, we hope that we'll be able to help clinicians.
Yes. By the way, I would call them doctors and nurses.
Okay.
Clinicians is a very funny. You all know what a clinician is, but people. Doctors and nurses is
or we want to find out, or we want to tell doctors and nurses what is most important during first months or years.
So here's a way I think you might finish it, but I may be wrong.
Okay.
We hope that by looking at the honeymoon period, we will help the doctors treating these patients to understand what's going to happen next. And that information is really helpful because it helps decide what treatment might be most effective.
This is absolutely true.
Okay. So we've kind of come to the end of our time, but I hope I've helped you a bit in understanding how to structure what you say. Elle, sorry, you had a question.
Oh, yeah, thank you very much. But I had a question that's very closely linked to Sandra's question about as a patient, I've also noticed very often newspaper headings say promising that a cure is near the corner, and this can affect you really badly as a patient, and you will resent the researchers for it. And researchers on the other end are very quick to point to the media in saying, yeah, that's from the media. But what can researchers do to take more responsibility or more accountability for what ends up in the newspaper?
Okay, so the one thing you need to know that in a newspaper, the journalist you talk to does not write the headline. So the headline is always written by somebody else, which can be a problem. So okay. Famously, we say in Britain of a newspaper called the Daily Mail, which is a terrible rag. They'll have a thing like, does eating Rice Krispies cause cancer ? And if there's a question mark, it always means the answer is no. But they nevertheless, they make you then go to read the piece to understand that no, Rice Krispies don't cause cancer. So one of the things I think that you need to be very clear when talking to journalists is whether this is short term, whether this is long term, whether this is basic research. And I think patients always understand that there is basic research to be done. And so I think you have to say specifically to, if you're being interviewed, this isn't going to help people in the next couple of years, but we do hope that it will be very useful to people developing drugs for the future, or people, I mean, who was doing the lifestyle? Charlotte, you were doing that. The lifestyle intervention, I mean, that's a thing where you want to say to people, we haven't got all the answers yet, and we can't tell you yet when is the best time of day, but we are working on it, and we know that people will be interested in this because it is interesting to people. That's absolutely fascinating what you're doing to the average person, because everybody will say, what's the best time for me to exercise? I mean, whether or not they've got diabetes, everybody's interested in circadian rhythms. They're absolutely fascinating. So, it's just trying to, I think it's just trying to put a lid on it with the journalist. Where are you, Els?
I am in Germany, but I'm originally from the Netherlands.
Oh, right, okay. So, yeah, you just have to make it clear to the journalist that you're talking to. But on the other hand, and I say this to you with all humility, is that actually, if your work gets cited in the media, your papers will be cited more often. So actually it's, and you know that the hype curve, don't you? That often things are talked up in the beginning. So I work a lot in genomics, and we're only now beginning to see the fruits of genomics. But actually it was everybody saying after the Human Genome Project first draft, this is the best thing since sliced bread. It's going to change medicine. Well, actually, it has changed medicine, genomics, but just 20 years later than everybody thought. So, so there's always a lot of interest at the beginning, but you need the interest in order to get the research funders into and interested in that field. So, yes, be wary about overhyping, but also be aware that actually your own paper is likely to be cited more often if you get, I mean, there's lots of evidence, that's not just assertion on my part, there's evidence that your own paper and publications will be cited more often, but also that it helps build interest in your field. And
Okay,
actually,
thank you.
in the long term, that's good for patients. So, Katerina, do you want to close?
Oh, I'm just enthusiastic about this webinar. I think people really enjoyed it. I really did. So I'm so happy you were with us. You know, I would like to have you in my pocket right before, you know, presentations.
That's not the first time people have said that to me.
I can imagine.
Listen, all of you, I'm very happy to help you. And, you know, if you want to do this again, or you want to do it in person, and it's always good fun to do it in person, then I'm very happy to be at an Academy meeting in the future, perhaps at EASD next year when we are in Hamburg, I think.
Yeah, sure.
And to do something there. But
I was just about to ask, so yes. Thank you.
But Luca, Yerman, Lars, Erica, Roxana, Katerina, all the rest of you that I haven't seen and haven't said hello to. I hope that was helpful for you too.
Absolutely, and I would also like to thank all the participants because they were active, very active. So thank you for making this a really interesting webinar. Thank you. Thank you, Vivienne. Thank you. Bye.
I found it really interesting. Thank you very much.